Hello everybody, welcome from me and from the troublesome InfluEnzo. Now, this is a rather familiar camera angle, isn't it? The Ferrari's in the garage with the engine cover open, and I'm sort of wistfully staring at the engine. Well, this is going to be, I think this is going to be quite a fun episode, because I think theoretically there is something that I can fix to make this better. I have the issue still with how much oil it's using, but for the moment, as I mentioned before, I'm not going to concern myself with it. It does run well, so I'm just going to use it. The big thing is basically that on right-hand turns it bogs down. Now, I didn't realise this until I started asking around, but apparently it's very common for the carb cars to do this. So it's not unique to the InfluEnzo. The first thing, absolutely, that anyone will mention if that happens is try and check the float heights. I have checked the float heights twice. I've spoken to various people. The float heights are as recommended, which is 48mm. I have measured them from the right places. However, I spoke to Mick at QV and he said, look, just try. Still, it's going to either be fuel starvation or it's going to be fuel, basically too much fuel going in because it's going over the top into the main jets, basically. So it's one of the two, so play about with the float heights. If you've got 48mm, try raising that and see basically if making a slightly lower fuel level, if that helps or makes it worse. So we're going to try and do that and see if that fixes it. But I'll show you first what it actually does as it is right now. I've put a camera on the back as well so that we can hear the engine note, and hopefully it'll be quite obvious when things aren't going right. And there you can hear it missing slightly as well. Right hander here. There you go. Ooh. So that was a constant throttle as well. I wasn't accelerating, I was literally just in true InfluEnzo style, I would say that that was utterly inconclusive. It did it some of the time, did do it mostly on right-handers. I actually found that occasionally it would do on left-handers as well. Okay, the airbox is off now, and I can show you exactly what is going on. These are the carb tops, and those two are the main jets, and that is the air feed on top of the main jets. Now you can see there is a hole going into the little fuel storage area of the car. But the idea is that if it's too high in there because of the float and you corner too hard, then eventually the fuel will come through that hole, will go into this area and will end up going through the main jets. Therefore the engine will get too much fuel and it will bog down. So that is one theory. The next theory is that there isn't enough fuel in there, so as the fuel slops over to one side, it starts to starve both the idle jets and the mains. I'm going to take the carb tops off very gently here because I want to see if I can see any clue about the fuel level. Well, as you can see, there is actually very, very little fuel in there once you take the float out, so I just can't see how that is going all the way up here and then flowing through to those mains. So I'm almost certain that I'm going to try and increase the volume of fuel in there by altering the float height. So that means essentially I will need to do what? I will need to close the gap, so make the gap a bit tighter. So instead of 48 I might do 50mm and see what that does. Having measured these again, and you have to measure it from the carb top to the top of the float. In actual fact, I think that rather than 48mm, I think they're on 50mm. Now I know that's a very small change, but Mick had told me that some of the books say that it should be a 50mm gap and some say 48, and he was saying if yours are on 50 then change it to 48. But when I'd measured it previously, obviously 2mm either way, it's quite hard to tell frankly, and I'd seen it was on pretty much, it looked like 48, So anyway, that gives me a further indication that maybe closing that gap, so letting more fuel into the carb, is going to be the solution for that, and that it is suffering from fuel starvation. But definitely I'm going to close up that gap to 48 and see if that solves it, but that's potentially quite promising. Right, there's a couple of corners here on the estate which will immediately show me if it is fixed or not. So let's see. A slow but sharp left-hander here. Car currently at about 1500 revs. Go round, fine. Then a really sharp right-hander here, but slow, 1500 revs. Bogging down. And again. Yeah. Okay. I think it is safe to say that the problem is not resolved. Let's just do another one. This is another right-hander. And then, yeah, as soon as it straightens out, it gets better. Right. Of course it wouldn't be fixed. Okay. At this stage, before changing the float heights again, I'm going to do something else. I am going to just isolate the fuel filter, so I'm just going to bypass it completely. I think that's the easiest thing to do, to see if that could potentially be the problem. Then take it out again quickly, and then if that's not the issue, then play about with the float heights again. So here's an interesting thing of itself. There's the new bypass filter, there's the old filter. I've connected it up, but there's no fuel currently, or hardly any fuel I would imagine it to be completely full straight away from the pressure coming from the fuel tank, which is just there. But on its own, there doesn't seem to be anything in there. I'll switch on the fuel pump now and see if that clears it through. But that is interesting. Surely if I remove that bolt, there should be fuel. If I remove this bolt here, there should be fuel pouring out of that fuel tank. So there should be some fuel in that filter. So, odd one. Okay, with the pump on, it does all seem to be flowing with fuel. So, we'll try and take it for a quick drive and see how it behaves. You know what, I don't think it is the fuel filter, but anyway, we've got a couple of corners coming out of my house that will definitely show me straight away, so I'm not going to bother going for a long drive. Fine on the left-hander as always, and now right-hander, the test. Still bogging down. Yeah, still bogging down right-hander as well. Okay. It's not the fuel filter. So that's another thing eliminated, so that is good. Okay, they were all 48mm. I've just remeasured them as well to make sure. I'm now going to change them to 52. So I'm going to go back. They were at 50, they went to 48. I think that was the wrong way. So we'll go to 50. So that means that there will be now less fuel than there ever has been in those bowls. And let's see if that that does anything. It's already sounding, is it worse? Sounds a little bit fluffy. Okay. Here's the right-hander. It's so obviously going to do it. Yeah. Although, to be fair, yeah, it's... oh, no! Oh! Oh! Ah! I was going to say it was better, but it isn't better. It's exactly the same. Ah! Will I ever fix anything on this car? I started off with what looked like a gap of 50mm. I then went down to 48, and it didn't seem like it made much difference. I then went to 52, and actually that didn't make any difference in the sense that it still did it on right turns, but the car started driving worse, so I think that was definitely causing fuel starvation, which makes sense because you're opening up the gap, so there will be less fuel in the float. So the next thing that I want to check that I haven't checked, and I should have checked, is you don't just check the actual gap when it's touching the needle valve. You also have to check the gap to when the float is completely open. It's counterintuitive because you'd think that wouldn't make any difference, but in actual fact it does. Now the reason for that is that how low the float can sit in the chamber will affect how the fuel behaves under cornering, because it will sort of probably stabilise it. If it's far enough down, it'll stop it from sloshing around too much because it'll be in there, so to speak. And that sounds a bit weird and I'm not explaining myself, but anyway, I need to check that next. So what I was saying is, that's how I've been measuring, which is the most important gap, and that is when it's just touching the needle but not depressing it. Okay, and that is now set on 48, which is what it's supposed to be. What we need to check now is how far it opens up. So it should be, this one looks like it's right, so it should be 58.5, and that looks absolutely spot on, which is disappointing. Well everybody, clearly there's been an error of judgment here, and the error of judgment was that at the beginning of the video I said here is something about the InfluEnzo that I think I can fix, and quite clearly I haven't fixed it, so this sort of ends in defeat. But there's a couple of things that are good. First of all, just about a week ago, the InfluEnzo actually saved another car. All right, it was only a flat battery, but all the same, the InfluEnzo came to the rescue of another Ferrari. So that was just quite satisfying, really, after having been in the garage for months on end. The other thing is that I've just had a thought about something. I've been speaking to Webcon as well, who've been really helpful. And with those floats, you obviously measure the float height. However, if the float is bent on the arm, you could get the measurement completely correct. But in actual fact, so you could measure it and it would look completely correct, but in actual fact, it wouldn't be acting on the needle in the same way. So the reason why I noticed this is that some of them are differently angled to the others. So I don't have time to do anything about it now, but in the next video I'm going to be having a look at that, and hopefully we can make some progress this way. I'm determined to find what it's doing, because they didn't do this as new. A lot of them do it, but they didn't do it as new, so I don't see why it should be doing it now. So I will conquer it. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I will try and fix it. Thank you all so much for following, and I know the videos with the InfluEnzo are never ending, but I don't know, some of you still seem to like to watch, so thanks very much. Please do follow me on Instagram if you don't already, and that's the best way to send me messages and contact me if you need to, and see you for the next one.